Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Down But Not Out. Today, I'm joined by Alex Quilici. Alex has a PhD in computer science from UCLA and held multiple roles in several technology companies before founding YouMail in 2007. YouMail protects consumers, enterprises, and carriers from harmful phone calls using its technology that holds over 11 patents. Their consumer solutions answer over a billion live calls each year and have over 10 million registered users. Alex, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. I don't know if my introduction sufficed, but would love for you to give a brief background for the audience.
Well, I was an AI PhD, and I went to go become a professor, and I watched a lot of people I knew start companies and have really interesting experiences, and I decided I wanted to do that. And fortunately, I had a great postdoc who's actually Canadian and from Waterloo, went to Waterloo. And we decided to build a speech recognition system. So we decided that we wanted to build a shopping service that you could just call in and say specialized mountain bike and the model number, and it would tell you what it was, how much it cost, where you could get it. Because I was finding it, we were all shopping. This is before smartphones. We're shopping in stores, wanting to know if we're getting a good deal, right? So we founded that company. It evolved quite a bit, but AOL bought us about 18 months after we founded it. And we spent a good 4, 5, 6 years doing services at AOL. So the first voicemail to email service that hit any scale, that was us. The first big voice recognition service, what's the weather like? Read me my email. That was us. And I did that for a while. And then ultimately I was going to take some time off, and I actually wasn't the founder of YouMail. I invested in these guys who built a little system that seemed to have better voicemail than what the carriers had, that they built themselves in a short period of time. And I've been with YouMail ever since.
And you mentioned AI, and I don't want to date you at all, but were you in AI before everyone else was in AI, before it was really cool?
Yeah, well, there was an AI winter, and I started after the AI winter when it started to come back. So we did natural language systems. I actually did a PhD in how to get a computer to argue, right? With the idea that you could build better help systems by understanding the intent of a question and trying to have a dialogue. So that was, an early example of trying to do practical AI, leveraging the technology was there then or extending it. So a little bit before it became really cool, but it wasn't uncool at the time.
Okay. Yeah. It's definitely before it's the buzzword, right? That we all know it as right now.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then that leads you up to YouMail, as you mentioned. You bought into the company, and now you're the CEO, acting president. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm the CEO of YouMail. I've been for quite some time. The story was that, I liked their application. I thought that carriers were ripe for disruption because everything they did is so bad, right? And voicemail is just kind of another example of it. And we'd had a lot of experience scaling a voicemail business at AOL and doing some interesting things, especially for small business users. So I thought, hey, there's probably a market here. If we can sell to carriers, we can get scale quickly and make a big difference. So I was willing to put a bet in there, and one thing led to another, and I found myself running the company within a year and raising money and doing the whole thing. So it's funny how I didn't plan on doing this at all, but I'm glad I did.
When was this? YouMail was started in what year, and then when did you join?
2007 was roughly when I left AOL and went to YouMail. So it's almost 15 years, which is an amazing amount of time for one company. And at the time, if you look back, people were starting to use smartphones. There's an opportunity to build, apps, and carriers had no experience in apps. Things were starting to move to the cloud, so they weren't all locked up in proprietary systems. So it felt like there were a lot of trends that made it interesting to do communication services better.
Yeah. And how young was YouMail at this time?
It was around for a few months. It was just,
a few months.
Guys that built a prototype. They actually spun it out of a call center company. They didn't like working on the call center. They built this thing, got permission to spin it out and start it up, and didn't really know what they were going to do. But those are the kind of things where you figure, hey, they'll figure it out.
Yeah. And YouMail's obviously, as I mentioned in the intro, doing very well to date. Walk us through from 2007 up until your down but not out moment.
So our down but not out moment came in the first 3 years of the company. But the idea was we want carriers to adopt this. And really simply, we had to build a system that could scale. We had to sell a system to carriers. We had to get the carriers to actually deploy it, and then we had to get them to pay us. So it's kind of a set of steps. And we started with smaller carriers, and we had some success of getting them to adopt it. It was hard to get them to pay. It was hard to get them to scale it. And what basically happened is after 2.5, 3 years, we had a sales cycle that was longer than our runway. And so it's like, wow, this is really hard. The carriers, if we can get one, it's a great thing. It's really hard for a small company to do a deal with a wireless carrier, especially with new technology. And that led to our down but not out moment, where it's like, ooh, we don't have any cash left, or we're going to run out very soon. We don't have enough customers and carriers. We have a tiny fraction of revenue from the carriers. What do we do?
And how much money did you raise going into this, roughly?
So we'd raised about $7 million in venture capital and angel financing to get there. It's a big project, right? And another $1.5 million to $2 million in debt. So we had about $9 million in the first 3 years to try to build, sell, and scale what we were going to do.
And then you mentioned you had put some of your own cash in there as well, mixed in.
Very little. That was the typical angel investment to start. A little bit more, to kind of put it in, because that helps get all the other investors to say, okay, if he's putting his money in, we'll jump in with more and be more comfortable. So at that point, I didn't have anything really meaningful in YouMail.
Yeah. And then what was revenue roughly at that point, 3 years in, or how many customers did you have?
So what's really interesting is we had almost no revenue from carriers, maybe 20,000 a month, 15,000 a month, if I remember right. But the part I hadn't talked about is, as part of this whole process, we decided we needed to get a consumer audience up and going. So we built a BlackBerry app, and BlackBerry didn't have voicemail, visual voicemail. So we built one that was as good as the iPhone for BlackBerry as a prototype, and then thought, well, let's get some consumers on it. Turned out we had 1 million consumers using it, even though it wasn't our focus, even though we were so myopically focused on chasing carriers. 1 million people had come and downloaded our app. And so we had $1.5–2 million in revenue. We had figured out a few services to help sell them. BlackBerry was a good audience at the time. There was a lot of small business people who were willing to pay for things. And so, that's where we sat. We had got some money from the consumer business coming in. We weren't paying attention to it. And we had, almost no money from the carriers. And that's what we're really focused on trying to build up.
And then cash became tight. Walk us through kind of once that decision was made that you didn't have enough runway left for the next few months.
So we looked at it and said, what are we going to do? If we keep going, we probably have 60 days of cash, and then we're going to, implode. We've got all this debt. There's no time to try to sell the company. We're probably not in a position to sell our core business. We haven't succeeded at. We haven't focused on consumers. So what do we do? So the first thing we did is we had to ask ourselves, do we think there's a real business here? And the answer came back, not with carriers. There is no carrier business. But consumers, we're not paying any attention. We're not really marketing it. We're not doing anything. And it's actually grown into a pretty interesting business. I mean, we did try to do a premium service that we could sell to consumers for subscriptions, and we built some cool stuff. Okay, the question now is, do we think we can grow the consumer business? And it's like, well, if we're just starting a seed company now, and I had $1.5 million in revenue in the first year without putting a lot of investment, that's an interesting company, right? So we said, okay, we're going to go in that direction. First thing is we're going to pivot, and we're going to focus on consumer communications, not carriers, right? Number one. Number two then is, well, how are we going to fund this thing? And the most important thing was, well, how long will it take us to get to break even? We've got subscription revenue coming in. We're spending, I think we're burning a couple $100,000 a month. Can we shrink the burn down enough that we can see a path to break even? I think we decided we could get to break even at $1.5 million, $2 million if we're really tight. So it's another 6 months to a year. And then it said, okay, we need $500,000 roughly to get to that point. So we recapped the company. And the down but not out moment is all the investors said, we're not going to do this. You're kind of on your own. And I said, okay, well, so then it became down to, am I willing to write a check for $250,000 or 300,000, whatever it was? And I went back to the investors and said, I'll write a check. I'll recap the whole company. You guys can come along with me. I don't need a lot from you guys, but you guys got to put in money too, because this is what we need to do to get to somewhere interesting. And it took some time, but with a plan that was really aggressive at shrinking the company. I think we got down to 8 people. We got rid of any office, which presaged this whole thing by 10 years.
Yeah.
And said, let's just get to stability, and then we can look at what we're going to do next, right? If BlackBerry's got this good market, then we can build Android, we can build iPhone. There's things we can do by carefully putting money in. And we had a great platform. It was scaling. We had a lot of calls. And everybody came along, and we did that. And that was the down but out, not out moment. Was we realized we had to do three things. We had to figure out what we were going to do, the pivot. We had to figure out how to shrink to get down to an amount that we could then get funded for. And I had to put in a check, and I ended up putting in more checks later on to kind of allow us to grow faster and move to other places. But that was the hard moment. And I had to decide also, and some of us either worked for half of a normal salary or almost nothing for a few years, everything we could to get, so very few dollars were going out. And we transformed the company and started growing at a pretty good clip, and eventually got to break even. It took us 2 years, not 9 months, but we did more stuff and got to a pretty interesting place.
How many employees were you at before? You mentioned you went down to about 8.
We were like 25, 28, something like that. It's been a while, but it was pretty hard, right? Because you're losing people. Some people voluntarily kind of see the writing on the wall and go. Other people just, hey, sorry guys, we don't have a position anymore.
Yeah.
And for us, what we ended up realizing was there was not going to be we couldn't afford marketing. We could barely afford customer support. We could afford a bit of development and some QA in order to build the app, in order to try to drive customers that are coming in to upgrade. And we narrowed our focus really tightly on that for a while.
One theme that I've heard about that scale down, did you say you got rid of the office?
We ended up with an executive suite by an airport that was like the size of a closet, and it had 2 desks in it instead of just one, and people sort of shared, and some people worked remotely. We'd use the outside, the outside picnic tables to meet, and it was like that.
Was it hard to scale down because you had scaled up with all these potentially these assets you had to take care of, liabilities you had to take care of? Was it hard to scale down, or did you find that quite easy?
It was difficult. I mean, some parts are easy because you say we're not going to do carriers anymore. Then you don't need your biz dev team. You don't need everything that was working for that, right? It's just that goes. But it is hard. It's like, well, can we support everybody with one customer support person instead of 5 or 6? Can we actually just have one developer? Can we contract out development? Those kind of questions come up, and it was pretty difficult. I mean, some of the management team went, so it ended up being me, my CTO, a few developers, QA person, a couple support people. And that was it. We really shrunk it down, and then you can gradually build back after that.
And did the founding team kind of stay during this period? Did some of them leave?
They'd all except for one had left within the first year. It turned out it wasn't a good fit. They didn't have the skills we needed for growing the company, even though they had a nice idea. And the last founding team member left as we were going through all of this, transition. Because at that point, it wasn't clear what was going to happen. I think I was pretty optimistic we could get somewhere interesting, but some of the founding team said, well, I need a better job, more reliable. I want to do something else. And that's how it goes, right? It's tough when you've gone through that valley.
Absolutely. And I know it's 10 plus years ago, as you mentioned. Do you remember kind of how it was weighing on you personally? I'm sure you've gone through it potentially before or similar with the other companies or what have you. But do you remember how it weighed on you personally?
The biggest thing was sleepless nights as you're going through it, right? Because your decisions affect other people's lives. Your decisions affect this baby you've been working with for a while. You've got investors who put money in, right? Angel investors and VCs. And so all that stuff comes, and it's like, you have to make a decision that says, am I going to fail? And sometimes it's okay. If we've gotten to, well, we've got no carriers, got no consumers, we've got nowhere, then you just say, look, it didn't work, right? And you turn out the lights. But in our case, that 1 million consumers weighed on us, right? It was sleepless nights. But if we just go, wait, these people are going to lose this service they like. We've done something really important for them. And let's see what we can do. And the hope was after a year or two, we could find our way and find something that would allow us to scale the business and then kind of restart, right? Treat it as a company that wasn't founded in 2007, was really founded in 2010, right? We're as a consumer company, and now let's try to go treat us like a little seed stage thing and then go from there.
Yeah. And you've been able to scale back up since. How many employees are you at now?
So we have a team of about 70. So it's, but we've used a model that mixes both employees and contractors, and outsourcing things where it makes sense. So we've gotten much smarter about what's absolutely core to the business kind of forever versus what's tentative. We're exploring, we're going to try something, or it's doing maintenance. Maintenance software doesn't need to be done in the US or Canada. It can be done anywhere, right? So you can move that out to lower costs and have the most talented developers figure out how to build the new things, the things that really matter.
And have you raised money since? Are those initial investors still with you?
It's actually an interesting story, which has another down and out moment. But
oh yes, there's a good transition.
So we were growing the company pretty nicely, and all of a sudden, 2 years later, we got hit with 4, maybe 5. I'm trying to remember, class action lawsuits. So if you ever had a class action lawsuit as a company, it's really scary, right? You're just seeing huge piles of legal fees that are going to hit you. But this was twice as bad because they sued us personally. They sued my CTO, they sued me, they sued the board as individuals. And the story was basically, we had a feature where if you call the YouMail user, YouMail would send a text back to whoever called you with like a link to your website or messaging. It kind of presaged what you could do on the iPhone, where you can just say, I'm in a call, right? We would do this automatically, and it could be a lot smarter. So if you're a business person, you can just drive them to the website to make a calendar appointment. So these guys all said, oh, that's violating TCPA because the person who called you did not give consent to get that text message. So we're going to sue you for $1,500 for every text message you guys have sent out. It turned out we'd sent out about 200 million of them. So this was like $1 trillion lawsuit, right? And obviously they're not going to get blood out of a turnip. But we had this problem where that just shut us down completely. So we had to make a decision there. Do we just wrap it up and try to get some cheap settlement so we're done, or do we fight it? And we decided, what we're going to do? We're going to get our expenses down as low as we can, find the best lawyer we can who's relatively cheap, and fight this thing, and go talk to the FCC, talk to the regulators, and say, is this what you intended with TCPA? And eventually, after 3 years, we got a clean bill of health that said, no, you guys, it's perfectly legal. And so everybody folded, and we were able to grow. But that was a 3-year, where you're just in neutral. You cannot do anything, right? You try to keep the business going. Right. There's no chance of getting investment, zero. So I had to put some money in to help fund it through that stage. But we liked what we were doing. And what's really interesting is, as we were doing that 3 years, we discovered the robocall problem. So we had a feature in our service where you could play an out of service message to a phone number. That was designed originally to, the ex that's stalking you. Now he or she calls and they hear, this number's out of service. Oh, okay, I can't bother you anymore. Turned out that people were using it for the same phone numbers, 800 numbers, 312 numbers, like the same exact number for huge chunks of our audience. We realized this is how they were blocking calls. They let the phone number ring, but it hit our platform, play the message, and the caller would go away.
Makes so much sense. That makes so much sense.
And I'd love to say we were geniuses and we saw that coming. We didn't. We just looked at the data because we had enough users. And so where I'm going with all this is we decided we're going to pivot to become a robocall blocking company and a security company. And when we did that, I was able to raise almost $5 million from new investors and sort of angels and others in a big crowdsourced funding round. And we used at that point, we're at $2.5 million in revenue. We used that to grow from there. And so that was yet another, okay, we got to pivot a bit. Voicemail is not really the exciting thing, but the call protection part is. We need a little bit of money, but we need real money to grow. So let's get real money. And, let's push through. We got through the class actions and, keep going from there. And the interesting thing is that one, I don't think we had a choice, right? Like they were going to come after us anyways, was what we figured. So we've got to fight this. The only way to fight is with a company producing funds that will allow us to fight it. Let's keep the thing going and growing.
Yeah. And this is roughly 2015 then?
2015. Yeah, exactly.
Give or take. Yeah. And there was no settlement. You just got to walk away.
I mean, there's always a settlement, but it was not, we didn't have to do anything, right? It didn't, it was not painful for us.
And you personally had to pay the cost of the lawyer. Do you remember roughly I
think we spent $250,000 in legal fees.
Defending it?
Company.
Yeah. And did you have, I think there's a technical word for this, but I'm blanking on it. Personal liability insurance for yourself?
Yeah, personal liability insurance. First thing is if you're violating a law, this doesn't matter. And since they were accusing a company of violating TCPA, which is, a law plus a regulation, they're like, no, you guys are doing it wrong.
Oh, shit. Yeah.
It's like
that's when you're hoping they would step in.
It's like you get in a car crash. Oh, no, that was your fault. We're not paying, right? It's like
the first thing they look for, right? How do they get out of it? Yeah. It sounds like a kind of like a double trough journey, and I'm sure there's been others along the way, maybe smaller ones. But do you think that those better prepared you for or weathered you for the journey moving forward?
Yeah, it did. I mean, even the first one, it really helped me understand pivoting, right? You have to be okay with the pivot, and you've got to pivot. You can't kind of half pivot. And so when we decided we're going to get into call blocking, we really put a big effort into that and really invested money in it and really started thinking about how to position our company around it, to the point now, if you go to the website, YouMail is about call protection. That is what we are. And the fact we do voicemail is just as a way to protect your voicemail box and keep the spam out of there, right? That's a complete pivot. Like, it took us a little while, but we drank the Kool-Aid. We're going to pivot. The other thing I realized is that you really need to expect that you're wrong on how much money you need, right? You're going to be optimistic naturally because of the pain of writing checks and having to go back to investors. And so when we raised that, 5 million, that was enough to really make a difference, right? It really allowed us to grow. It allowed us to do the pivot. We were very, we spent it wisely, which was the third lesson, which is spend your money very wisely. Be very clear on what the return is going to be. Try not to have permanent expenses if you can help it. We made a few errors in hiring the wrong person, which was tough to get out of. But in general, we started getting much better at how we hired. We only hired what we absolutely needed. We built relationships up with firms that were experts. So we didn't have to hire an SEO person. We have an SEO firm. We didn't have to hire a person to do online marketing. We worked with an agency. So we started outsourcing a lot of those pieces, so we had flexibility and we'd never have to go through that. Oh my God, I got to lay off all these employees, go through that whole process.
Yeah, absolutely. The voicemail part of the business, that's still active. It's still going, because you said you pivoted away from it.
It's part of our service, but what we want to do is essentially, you can think of YouMail as ultimately a new phone app, right? So we're going to block calls. We're going to keep your voicemail clean. And when you make calls, we already do some of this, we're going to make sure the phone number you're calling is the right one, right? So you're not calling a fraudulent phone number, a fake Citibank or whatever else. And so voicemail is a piece of it, but it's a much bigger vision about, protecting your ability to make phone calls. And then we moved to having a second line service. So you can get another phone number from YouMail, which is set up for businesses. Again, it's the same phone app, lets you do all your email stuff and call and manage your second phone number. And it has a virtual receptionist and kind of the features you want if you basically want your company switchboard to be your cell phone. And that's been pretty popular. And we see people come in because they got some robocalls they want to block. They realize that we can do some really good protection. And they go, I don't mind getting phone service from these guys. And so it was a really nice path, all built around protection, with our voicemail being a part of it. It's really unique. It's cool, but that's not the company anymore. And at some point, YouMail should shrink our name down to really small font and put something else as our name, because the YouMail part isn't that important.
Yeah. It's just a name at the end of the day, right? Some branding at the end of the day. Yeah,
exactly.
So you mentioned a few times in there, obviously the double pivot. During those, usually what I've seen and what I've gone through is when those moments come up, you lay out your options, right? Your 3, your 4, your 7 options, what have you. Was ever walking away on the table?
It was an option we thought about, right? So, if I'm going to have to write a big check, I'm going to have to get investors to write checks. If I'm going to have to devote a couple of years to get to break even and figure out where this business is going to go, do I want to do that? Or is this just a failure? We just didn't make it. And I think for us, the reason we didn't go down that path was we had that 1 million BlackBerry downloads and we hadn't really put a lot of effort. And that told us, hey, there's a market. And ultimately we've gotten over 10 million downloads of our service. So it's really, grown far beyond that initial audience. And so I think, walking away is something you've got to consider. Like, legitimately, it's on there and you have to decide, if I walk away there, I could do something else. And is there an opportunity cost, or do I really want to work with this? And, the team decided we really like what we're doing. We really think we could make a difference. And now we really are. We're protecting people. Our technology is being used now by carrier networks to find bad guys and get rid of them. Built up a whole B2B business on it. So we're doing stuff we love, right? We're protecting America. So I'm really glad we didn't walk away, but we seriously thought about it.
And obviously talked with the founding team at that time, going through these, sorry, not the founding team, the partners that were involved in actively the executive team. Was there conversations with any of the employees at either of these moments? I guess more at the beginning of the first one. You said voluntarily, some of them kind of saw.
We told the employees, look, we're in trouble, right? Like these are our options, right? And we'd like you. Certain people said we'd like you to stay with us and go to the next level. Here's what we can pay you. Here's what we can do. As we grow, we're gonna do things better for you. But do you want to come along or not? And most people came along. Actually, it was really it's pretty cool.
I think founders struggle with that, right? Like, what do you tell the team? How much do you tell the team? How honest can you be? Do you think it was the right decision talking to the team about it?
I think you have to be transparent. If you're not transparent, you're always worried. Is the team going to find out something, right? Like, or it's what do your parents tell you when you're a little kid? Don't tell a lie because it's too hard to keep track of it. I would extend that to you. You better be transparent because you can't remember what you told this person or that person, like what you're hiding and what's on the table. And we just said, look, we're losing X dollars. We have this much cash. We want to keep going. Here's the plan to keep going. What do you think? Are you on or are you off? Right. And it worked out pretty well.
Yeah, it's a good story, a good journey along the way, a good down but not out moment, two of them along the path. And now YouMail's doing great stuff and over 70 employees, as you mentioned, 11 patents. Touch on that quick.
Actually, I think we're up to 13. So one of the things we learned is there was another patent lawsuit that actually hit us in the middle of all this, which was a minor down but not out. But we learned that we had to have some real defensive protection with patents so that people couldn't just sue us claiming something and we didn't have something where we could sue back, right? And so we made a big push to patent the interesting parts of our technology. We have some AI that's really good at figuring out if a phone number is bad, right? Like, is it misbehaving? We had technology that when we had a clip of audio, we could compare it and decide, is this illegal? Is this call an illegal call? Do that with AI versus people. A whole bunch of stuff related to that. And we just said, we're going to patent all this. So nobody can ever just sue us and we're defenseless and we have to figure out, a licensing deal. And so I think patents are really important as a defensive mechanism more than offensive for startups. You're not going to sue somebody and make $1 zillion dollars if you sue Microsoft or Google, but this is going to make everybody think twice about suing you if you've got a lot of patents around the core of what you do.
Yeah. We one of the other episodes was about a patent lawsuit and a patent troll that hit this smaller company at that point with the patent, and they had to defend it. And one of his big lessons and walkaways was, if you do have to defend, make sure you defend, otherwise you're going to be a target. Don't just settle right away, because the blood's in the water. They'll come after you after that. And it sounds like you dealt with something similar.
Yeah, we ended up settling just because we didn't see any other alternative, but we found a way to settle on reasonable terms as view it as a percentage of revenue, and the time period that was left in the patent wasn't that long. So we sort of just stomached it and just moved on. So that didn't even, that's, I guess, in the top 3, but not in the top 2 of our down but not out.
Yeah.
There's that moment when somebody sues you where you just go, oh crap, now I got to deal with this. Right?
Yeah. This is going to be a long 6 to 24 months that you're going to have to deal with it, right?
Exactly. I think we got it done in about a year, 6 months to a year.
Yeah. All right, we're going to wrap up, but you've already shared a lot of lessons and good takeaways, but anything else for someone that's going through kind of their down but not out moment or a tough time in their business?
I think one of the things I've learned we didn't talk about is the down but not out moments come much faster than you think sometimes, right? It's like you're on a little bit of a down slope where you see a little danger and then boom, it's right in front of you. Right. Yeah. So it's like the curve in a road. You kind of think the road's curving and all of a sudden you're going 70 and there's the curve, right? What do you do? And so I think one of the key things that to help people is think about what could kill you before it does. So don't get to the down and out moment. It's like, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months before, start looking at, do I think there's a down and out moment out there for me? And can I do things to push that out further? What can I do? It's very easy to be so focused on growing your business. Yeah, we'll get through that, that you kind of convince yourself you're going at a faster clip than you are, or the down and out where you're going to run out of cash is further than it might look. And it's really tough. So ideally you prevent it all the way. You can't always do that, but try to look further. I had an uncle who was a race car driver, And we were on the
Yep.
Autobahn in Germany. And he told me he was looking like a mile down the road all the time about the car that was going to swerve in or the truck that might hit his brakes. He was looking way out there all the time. I think it's a great metaphor for how you should be doing a startup business. You got to be looking a mile or two ahead for that truck that's going to be slowly curving into your lane when you think you're going 200 miles an hour.
Yeah, and I think we see it all the time, right? When you're growing at a rapid rate, it's hard to contingency plan and look a mile ahead when you're trying to look a few days ahead. But it is very important that you put those contingency plans in place and have a forward vision. Otherwise, it'll hit you out of nowhere and much quicker than you think.
And one of the things for us was it was good that we put a subscription business together on the consumer side. Like we started to hedge the carrier side ahead of making that complete pivot. Right. Oh, there's enough people here. If we can get, 2% to pay $2, that's a decent amount of money. And I think that saved us. If we hadn't had that, we were done. Right. Had been no revenue, even with a bunch of consumers. There's no way we could have kept going.
That's an interesting one too, because you're almost diversifying and taking multiple plays at the same time and seeing what works out. Right.
And that's a tough thing to do, right? Because for somebody, it's a distraction that you're now doing consumer stuff, right? Instead of the carrier stuff. And I think you have to hedge a little bit, but it's being very smart and very selective on where you do the hedging and doing it when it matters, right? Do it early enough. You can't go with 2 months of cash left going, well, I guess we'll create a subscription business. I mean, it's not going to work.
Yeah. I think the Netflix book from the founder of Netflix, How We Built. No, that's not it. But he talks about kind of ruthless prioritization, but running those tests as quick as you can. So throwing out some tests and then figuring out what works and then focusing on that. And it sounds like that's kind of been what you did, whether purposely or kind of just worked out in the end, right?
I think so. I think it's where your intuition is like, hey, this isn't working. What are we going to do? Oh, maybe it'll work. Maybe we can get the deal. Let's just see if these consumers will pay. That would be valuable for the carrier business, right? We'll be able to show they're paying. And then that turns out to be the saving grace, right? Is the time 10,000 people were paying us or whatever it was.
Yeah. I think for me, it's, I like to think that I'm smart, but sometimes I'm just stumbling through and finding what actually works and what doesn't, right? You throw out enough tests and you stumble across the one that actually does something.
It's really critical to try different things, right? I mean, whether it's formal A/B testing, it's like building an idea someone had that's a little bit different, but seems to have potential and seeing what it does. You've got to do some of that because frankly, as much as we'd like to think our vision is the right one, it's never the right one. Even if you look at Zuckerberg with Facebook or the Google guys, they didn't think about the advertising as the way to monetize their search engine. Someone else came up with it, 4 years later. And
exactly.
You're going to end up on a path that you don't know. And I never thought I'd be running a security company. Like that was that's the farthest thing from my mind. I'm a communications guy. I've done telco stuff and speech rec, but that's where the market was. And that's what we got funneled into over time.
Yeah. You kind of just stumble through until you hit the one thing that actually works.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, Alex, thank you for your time today. That's all for this episode. So thank you for sharing your story. To everyone listening, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, leave us a review. Also, subscribe to the show to be alerted of new episodes. And finally, like and share this episode on social media. Help us spread the word of Down But Not Out. Bye, everybody. Thanks again, Alex.
All right. Thank you.